Hello everyone and welcome to this new grand theme. As networks evolve and software gain more and more importance within companies, how can CIOs adapt to that? To discuss this topic, I'm glad to have Andre Kindness, Principal Analyst at Forrester. Hello Andre.
Hi.
So, as I was saying, cloud, data, AI, hybrid work, those are now commonplace, common words to which companies are very accustomed. Does that mean that regarding those changes, companies must, no matter what, redesign their network architecture?
Yes, I mean, it's not really a question of do they need to redesign it. The real thing is that they are redesigning it. What we're seeing today is maybe the magnitude of redesigning the network. In the past, we've seen maybe Wi-Fi being added to the network or slight changes in the data center. But today, it's almost every part of the network is needing to be addressed. We think about the fact is that virtualization, software in the data center changed the way data centers networks were built, and they're built on the concept of fabrics. That idea has now shifted across to the wide area network with cloud and hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. And even the fact is that remote offices connecting the cloud and SaaS types of environments. Now you have like these virtual connections and in the same thing you saw in the data center, connecting all these things together and creating this idea of fabrics across the entire thing. Then you throw on top of it the idea of hybrid work, really initiated a lot of ways by the pandemic that we saw a few years ago. But that fundamentally changed the idea that all connections from remote workers had to go into the data center. It just didn't work. VPNs didn't work. And so we saw that even caused a change in the reality of these idea of the fabric, a connection of users connecting to SaaS, connecting to cloud, connecting to private cloud. But what really affected all of this and this idea of fabrics themselves is the fact that then security had to shift from a data center, had to go everywhere, the zero trust concept itself. And so we start to think about that data center, WAN, and even remote locations had to fundamentally change what was going on. Something we've never seen before, almost in the US called Black Swan, force majeure kind of concept itself. And the last piece of this is the third piece that's really fundamentally causing this exceptional change that we've never seen before is IoT. And why I bring that up is because if you think of a company like Carrefour, Renault, they have partners that have devices inside their buildings, inside their cars that need network connections, and they ride on the same network as that company's network itself. And so you're inviting somebody else and some other business to share that business. It becomes a multi-business network itself. And from a security, from a management standpoint, it fundamentally is causing such a shift in networking itself that we've never seen before. So almost every part of the network is changing. And so companies are starting to address this, maybe in one area or another, but the realities are unlike before, it's happening. Is all of it occurring at the same time? No, it depends on the business itself, but the realities are networks and the architectures and the way they're built and managed are fundamentally changing today.
So in this change of paradigm, as you were saying, there's been a rise, a phenomenal rise of softwares and SaaS. Would you say the proportion of software and SaaS solutions adopted by companies represent, and how did this major change happen throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, it really started off in the virtualization in the data center where before we had one app, one server connected to one port in the network itself. And now you start to cut up this server and it has applications sitting on it, and applications start talking to each other. And the realization is that software starts to be able to break up hardware and use it in a more efficient way. It starts to expand itself. And we see this happening, and this is why we see the rise of cloud. Software starts to take storage and servers and network and partition up so multiple organizations start to use it. And you see this idea that you start to improve with software efficiency of hardware, you build bigger hardware, you use software to improve that. Now, from a networking perspective, it only makes sense is the ability to, use switches and appliances and start to use software to enhance those areas. So software really brings around the flexibility and optimization of hardware itself. Now, how much gets used in each area can vary dramatically. Cloud, almost, as outside user going into an AWS or Azure or a GCP, everything you use out there is 100% software gateways, switches, load balancers. In your own data center, you might have a mixture of hardware, software in those areas. In a remote office, it might be all hardware, just a tiny bit of software, maybe optimization techniques, maybe some software firewalls. But the value it brings is that you can spin things up and down and use them as needed, because in this world that we talk about, the fact is applications and data are spread everywhere and moving and continuously changing. Software allows you to optimize the hardware, but also allows you to mimic where the data and the things are at, to be able to spin things up and down, to secure them, to optimize them, to connect them, to support the applications depending on data where they're ever at with this environment. So software is an integral part of the world we live in today. How it gets used and where it gets used is very dependent on the location of the platforms they're using in this environment.
You were mentioning the changes that the companies are going through. You were saying that this network almost evolution, but almost a revolution. They were already at it, in the middle of it. For a lot of for companies, it changes a lot of things on a lot of aspects, and it can be a little scary to having to deal with these all these projects at once. So, what do you think that are the main goals, the main objectives on which companies should focus? Is it a higher speed connection? Is it more network security, more governance, more trust between the collaborators? What would you say?
Even on my network analyst, I love networking. I would agree. Security is paramount in this emerging world. I mean, data is spread everywhere. We have to think about regulations. We have to think about privacy. So the zero trust concepts that were initially set in a data center has to expand out to almost every endpoint, every link, every virtual connection in this area. So completely agree that security is the paramount thing. Bandwidth and speeds, unless you're talking certain areas, actually, we don't use fully the extent of it. What we need to focus in on is, and this transcends the type of business that's out there, is monitoring and gathering information of the infrastructure of the network itself. And the reason why is that's a fundamental piece to being able to have this network be a little bit more autonomous, be software defined, intent-based networking, all the buzzwords that we use about having this network reconfigure and redesign, spin things up, extinguish things, extinguish services, depending on the need of the business at any point in time or where applications and data is at. So to make that happen is, we have the hardware, we have the management systems out there, but to know the state and to what you want to change it to requires bringing in information. And that's actually the least amount of investments companies have done over the last probably 10 years. And yet it is paramount to be able to analyze it and figure out how to optimize the hardware and software within the network to adjust itself to the business needs or to the technology needs of the business itself. So gathering information, monitoring, having visibility within the network itself, then you can use that and send it to information systems, artificial intelligence or machine learning, to be able to synthesize it and change the network itself, use management to push down controls and policies to the network to make those changes itself. So, circling back around, security paramount, embedding it everywhere for sure. The project of where I would spend the money at before I'd buy new equipment, before I would do anything else, is monitoring. And then maybe a third area is really the skill sets of my before I buy anything else. Separate, I've said monitoring, investing in monitoring, gathering information is critical to be able to solve just problems going on in the network. Is the technology is out there, the management systems are out there. What is lacking in this environment to make a lot of this happen, to make this autonomous network happen, is the skills of the networking professionals to do a lot of coding and connect these systems together. They're used to traditional networking. We're changing the way networking is done. And so the other area of investment, by far, not a particular project, is investing in the skills of your networking professionals and your networking teams out there. So 3 things: security, monitoring, and skills are the 3 areas that I would put some projects around.
And about security, do you think it represents this network security? Do you think it represents still a blind spot for a lot of companies and CIOs?
Definitely, I think to the extent is because we're fundamentally changing the architecture. All security used to be in the data center, and now you hear of software edge or SASE, we call it zero trust edge, security services in the cloud. It's just starting to come to fruition the last 2 years, in the movement toward that area. But even that, as we start to think about IoT, that even pushing security, maybe a virtual firewall down to the gateway, down to close to that endpoint as possible. We have them on laptops, but we think of like shelf weights for like Carrefour, or we think of in a manufacturing sites, with Philips when they're building things out in their manufacturing sites, even PLCs and flow meters. Those are all potential things that don't have software agents on them. We need security kind of as close to it as possible. And so I would agree that we are just beginning in many ways our journey of taking zero trust and really extending it to every parts of a technology, electrical, mechanical world around us to really start to build the trust we need to do. We're far from that, but security is a big investment, and we're just beginning some of the journey around that.
And you were mentioning all the ways in which network security changes, all the tools that have to be implemented for companies. It also means that the job of the CIO also evolves, also changes on a almost daily basis.
Yeah, on daily or just a strategic basis. We're seeing the security and networking worlds mesh together there's tons of solutions out there. We hear of Zero Trust Edge, SASE, we hear of multi-cloud networking solutions, even VMware in the data center brought in virtual firewalls and physical within that environment itself. So almost every part of the network, you're seeing security embedded in it. So from a CIO standpoint is how do I reorganize my teams? Do I keep them as separate teams? It just doesn't make sense when things are being built together. Maybe you mesh them together, or maybe you create a separate team that has a component of networking and security teams together. You still have your two major teams. So that is a CIO structure thing that the teams have to think, that the CIO has to think about almost on a daily basis. I would also say that what's fundamentally changing too, and when it comes to the network is, and surprisingly, a lot of people will take a step back, is it's not a commodity. It's not like electricity. It could be fundamentally a difference for a business itself. And what I mean by that, how a network gets used in the hospital, how it gets built, is very different than how a network gets built in a manufacturing site, or even how a network supports a company like Renault or Airbus, that they need to get information from the car and then maybe diagnostics and things like that. So when you think about your aircraft all over the world, you think about your cars all over the world, are you building a network to it and a network inside of it to capture the data and to optimize it? So that network, as it gets closer to your product or gets embedded in your product or becomes part of your product, is actually a business differentiator. And so that's almost the idea, is the CIO has to start pushing down is, what parts of my network are a business differentiator, can retain customers, help customers, improve customer experience within the product or the service I'm delivering. And that is a very different mindset than we saw 10 years ago when we think about just electricity. Case in point, Google, their data center network or their global network is their differentiator. And so that idea is now that networks are becoming a business differentiator is something that the CIO needs to push down and ask the teams, what parts do we need to craft to support our business? Are we a retailer? Are we a hospital? Are we a manufacturing? And what unique things need to happen in those areas? And the last thing I'll leave you off. So security, need to think about the fact that their network is business optimized around the network's built around the optimization of the business. And the third thing I'm gonna leave you off on is that CIOs can't depend on their networking vendors anymore. They're not the leading lights of how things need to go. It's actually, they've fallen behind. They're reacting to the business, to the world out there. So really, is the best position of your network is to look at your peers, look at what other companies are doing. Sometimes maybe they look at the cloud providers and say we can take some of the best practices there, but in reality, it's looking at businesses similar to you and seeing how they're using their network and what they're investing in, and doing it from that point, not looking to the vendors to say that you need to buy this, you need to buy everything from us, because we know what's the best out there. They're actually responding to these massive, huge, large changes in the industry itself. And so your peers are almost your go-to when it comes to information and how to restructure and push down concepts or set strategies up for your overall network to support your business. So those three things: security, business, and look to your peers to change the way you're doing things, and the approaches and the strategies that you'll go as you move forward.
Well, thank you very much, Andre. Thank you for all your
Thank
answers.
you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure having you. As for I will be glad to see you all in the next Contema video. Goodbye.